I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I please ask you to remain standing for a moment of silence for Bill Wilson, who died at Rhode Island Hospital. He was a contractor for Bus 9 in our district. Thank you. Mrs. Healy, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Avanzato? Mrs. Glasbog?
Here.
Mrs. Clarkin?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGovern?
Here.
Mrs. Held? Here. Mr. Representative? Thank you.
Mrs. Healy, will you please recite the calendar?
Friday, March 25th is Good Friday, and schools will be closed. Tuesday, April 12th, there will be a school committee work session at 7 p.m. at the Central Administration Building.
Thank you. Dr. Auger, would you like to introduce our presenter?
Sure. First up for presentations tonight is Mr. Dave Marble. He is the president of Oshin. The North Kingstown School Department contracts with Oshin for a lot of our internet capacity, and he has spoken to some of the administrative team here in North Kingstown about some ideas that he feels that we should be involved with right now. And I'm going to let him explain all of this and to kind of get the conversation started. This is not something where we're looking for a vote on anything tonight. What I would be looking for at the end of this presentation is kind of a consensus to continue to pursue this for something more definitive down the line. Mr. Marble. Thanks. If you could use the microphone, that would be really helpful too. Thanks.
So it's good to be back. I actually put three students through the North Kingstown school system, and they're all doing great. So you did a great job. And anytime I do these kinds of things, I always wear two hats. So in this particular case, I have the hat of a North Kingstown resident, state of Rhode Island resident, and then as CEO of Oshin. And Oshin actually is an acronym that stands for Ocean State Higher Education and Administration Network. And a number of years ago, we actually merged with what used to be called RINET. And RINET was the K-12 and library network in the state. And now we are a nonprofit that operates this research and education network on behalf of the K-12s, the libraries, the universities, the hospitals, and the government of our state. We actually support any nonprofit in trying to provide as low a cost and fastest, internet and fiber services that we can. The network is huge. We have 550 miles, believe it or not, in the state of Rhode Island of fiber, which is kind of like carpeting. And this network has 155 members associated with it. We recently completed a $32 million federal grant to upgrade and build sort of the latest and greatest fiber networks. And one of the reasons is that left unchecked, it would be very hard for schools and universities and what is called the community anchor institutions to support the massive growth that's going on in things like internet connectivity and fiber connectivity and those kinds of things. So the federal government saw fit and continues to see fit to try to help subsidize, especially the schools, in helping them get to and support the growth that's going on in their bandwidth needs. And to that end, all schools, when they buy internet and fiber and connectivity to the internet and all that, they buy through a program called E-Rate. Do we know what E-Rate is? Some of us do. And E-Rate is a subsidizing fund at the federal government level that sort of follows the pro forma of a school lunch program. So if you're North Kingstown's a 50% school, so half of your bill for technology at the fiber and internet level actually gets paid for by the federal government. That thing called the E-Rate was rewritten a year ago, and it's now called E-Rate 2.0. And one of the things they recognized was with this massive increase, they were going to run out of money. So what I'm here to show you is what's going on with respect to that and some of the opportunities at a town level that we should be looking at relative to the future owned, what I think should be an owned asset by the town of North Kingstown. We'll get to that in a second. So one of the things that we're asking here is the transformative learning environments that we're seeing, flipped classrooms, the idea of using blended learning techniques, the idea of breaking down the walls of a classroom into more experiential learning and so forth. Are all of those things going to break your network? And in many cases, the answer to that is yes. It's going to break because you don't have the money or you don't have the infrastructure to support the kind of bandwidth that's required to come into a classroom to support these kinds of larger video-oriented multimedia experiential learning environments. And so there's been a massive change in the industry. And to give you an idea, the state of Rhode Island 4 years ago, in total, took 2 gigabits worth of bandwidth for all the schools in the state of Rhode Island. Today, it's 25 gigabits. 4 years later. It's incredible what's going on. The thirst for bandwidth is just going crazy. And so the federal government, in concert with the FCC and COSN, which is the national organization that looks at school networks and so forth, did a study, to look at this growth and project out over the next 10 years and say what's going to happen. And I'm going to talk about what's going on right now, but they've set national standards of how much bandwidth they think each student should have. And the 2017 standard for that is going to be 1 megabit per student. And I'm going to show you what the impact is to North Kingstown just relative to that single standard. So it's also not only happening at the student level, but even all the applications that the teachers are using and so forth just for themselves, using and putting up web portals and trying to provide all of those kinds of things. Cloud services for these web portals that sit out in that all takes bandwidth and infrastructure to get to. And it's really, really straining current networks. So this is an eye chart, but just to show you, there is went backwards. There is a lot of documentation behind this standard, so I can, obviously this will be available to all of you, but there are FCC rules that govern what they think the per student number should be for bandwidth into every school. You got X number of students, you multiply it times a megabit per student, that's how much you should have, right? And going forward. And so this has all been done by the FCC, and what they found out as I go along is that that this external connection right now, which was a kilobit or 100 megabits per student, in just 3 years has gone to 10 times that amount per student. And it's an amazing growth. And from here on in, they project that's going to grow 66% per year. And for those of us in the business, it's literally frightening to see what kind of growth is going on and consumption. And the bottom line is that even that multi-billion-dollar fund that supports North Kingstown High School is going to run out of money. And they said it was going to, they did the math. So we're going to run out of money. There's also a companion fund in the state of Rhode Island called RITEEF, which tries to help supplement the 50% that you don't get from the federal government. Well, guess what? Same math. That's going to run out of money too. That one is actually going to run out of money faster. And the reason is that that fund is subsidized by everybody's phone bill. There's a little charge in Rhode Island on your local landline phone bill that supports part of the funding for this technology into your schools. Well, guess what's happening to all the landline phones? Everybody's getting rid of them, right? And our current legislature is loath to support a switch to a cell phone tax for that particular fund. So there's not a whole lot of appetite right now to fix that problem. So what the federal government did, thankfully, is they turned around and said, well, what if we funded construction? So what they realized was if we extrapolate it out over the next 10 years, the fund runs out of money. If we just keep on having to buy bigger and bigger and bigger lines, we're going to run out of money. What would happen if the schools and the libraries got together and said, let's build our own infrastructure, our own asset that we own for the next 20 years. And then we don't have to be beholden to doing all this. So they literally did the calculation and said, we will fund the construction of your owned fiber asset. So picture connecting all of the schools in North Kingstown, and we'll talk about the town play as well as part of it, and owning that from then on in. Now you actually end up controlling your own destiny because it's essentially your asset long term. And you can buy a service that overlays on top of it that basically says somebody will take care of the maintenance and all of that, and I can get into that if you'd like. But the federal government now has a model that allows a town like North Kingstown to come back and say, this is what we think it will cost to connect every school on fiber so that we can control our asset for the next 20 years, and we'll tell you whether or not, and they'll pay it up front, cash, for the construction of that network in year one, which is an unprecedented opportunity. And so towns all over the country and cities, LA Unified School District, huge, is doing this, right? Is putting in a pro forma that says, here's what we think it will cost to construct this. Here's what the return on investment model looks like based on what we think our growth is and what we're currently paying. And the federal government is turning around and turning those applications back saying yes, no, or otherwise, or you need to go back and do your homework. So, you know, from a citizen, complete citizen, non-CEO of Ocean perspective, I'm sitting there saying we should really look at this on a town-by-town basis. And I've gone to a number of towns in Rhode Island, and we're talking about this on an individual town basis because everyone's different. Some got their own piece of fiber here and over here, and you need to piece it together to get it to look right. And help build the pro forma. We have all the templates that they're using at the FCC and so forth. And I'm saying we would be irresponsible from a fiduciary perspective to not look at the opportunity that the federal government is offering us, you know, to look at owning on and controlling our asset. It's you know, it may sound scary to own your own fiber, but it actually is not. And to me, you know, it's just something, and as Phil said, we're not really asking for much more than, do you want us, and do you think this is something we should look at long term? Now, the last piece of this is they allow the town itself to also participate. And all you have to do, so the town can, so if they're building a town-wide district WAN, the town itself can actually add their municipal buildings onto that. And the only thing that the E-rate won't pay for is that small little lateral that connects the building to that district WAN, but they'll pay for everything else. And so it is incumbent on the town as well to take a look at this to actually participate in this kind of a thing. There's a lot of detail behind here. It's a non-trivial, it's a complicated thing. But we are experts. We know people at the FCC that are actually adjudicating these applications, and we can help walk your folks through it, and we could participate together. So the ask, I know I went through this very quickly. We did an analysis of North Kingstown schools, and it turns out that 8 schools already don't meet the 2017 standard. So currently, they're already underwater based on the federal government level. Now, I don't want anybody to panic because we also monitor all your bandwidth and you're okay for now, right? So I don't want you to think that, you know, but I'm just showing you where the federal government sees all of this going and relative to where you stand today. And so we've done an extrapolation long term of what this really looks like. And we believe there's a pro forma in here that says this pays back in about 5 to 6 years. So to own an asset that then goes for 20 more years that you own is extraordinary. So that was just a very cursory look at all the schools and how many students are in each school and all that kind of stuff and where they are located on close to our backbone and that kind of thing, and what it would take to actually build this kind of a thing. So the real ask says, do you think this is compelling, and is this something that you would like us to work with your IT department, with Mike and Phil, and work on the pro forma? And also, do you think it would be interesting for us to then talk and bring the town into the same discussion? As someone who now runs a company that owns a fiber asset in the state for the next 25 years, it is amazingly powerful once you get control of that destiny and what you can do with that long term. It changes everything. And there are a number of towns. East Greenwich has already done theirs, even ahead of the curve. So they did it with their own money. But this is money we could get help from the federal government on. So I would certainly highly recommend that we take a look at it. So those are the two things that I think we should take a look at. But I know I went really fast, and it's all about like fiber and internet and all this kind of crazy stuff. But you know, the fiber and the internet stuff is becoming a utility, and it's becoming a absolute must-have. And when you turn around and you want to do park testing, right? And by the way, they talked to Pearson, who's doing all the park testing, the people who are doing this pro forma, and their people are writing videos into the questions. So now you've got, say, 300 juniors that are all taking the test, and they're watching videos, and they're all online in a singular school. And, you know, beware, because this is going to be
Multiplied by the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah, and they're all happening in May, for example, on the juniors, right? And they're all happening at the same time, and it's going to be crazy. But we'll take care of the rest of the state of Rhode Island for smoothing that all out. But for North Kingstown's own, you know, sort of asset, this is really fairly compelling. So, any questions, or did anybody understand what I said?
Mrs. McGovern has a question.
Sure.
So it wasn't too long ago when they had basically coaxial, then
yes.
upgraded all that to the fiber. And then you mentioned in here dark fiber. So what does the future look like for the actual physical infrastructure that carries the data?
It's a good question. So so currently, fiber isn't everywhere. So, you know, to some of your schools, you have fiber, and we put fiber straight into the front door at North Kingstown High School, but to some of your elementary schools, you're still on coax, right? And you have lots of different technologies in between. The difference with this is the idea of dark fiber says it's just the fiber. We own the asset. You can light it on either end with virtually any technology you'd like as you go along. And so what we do is, for example, we have fiber all over the state. Well, we can turn what is a 10 gigabit circuit, change the optics on each end, and turn it into a 100 gigabit circuit, right? And so the idea would be that you would turn around and you'd build a 1 gigabit fiber, dark fiber infrastructure, right? Somebody else would light it, we would light it, or another vendor could light it. It doesn't matter whether it's Ocean or Cox or anybody. Anybody can do this, right? But they would light it and run it, and you'd have that kind of an infrastructure. 2 years down the road, you might turn around and say, no, we need 2 gigabits or 10 gigabits or 100 gigabits. And that vendor would light your dark fiber asset. So you don't have to go back out. E-Rate is put into a service called Managed Optical, where you can go to any vendor, and they'll manage that optical play for you, and you don't have to go buy 100 gigabit stuff, you know, later on. They'll take care of that at a service level. So what it allows you to do is to own the asset that can get sort of upgraded as you go along, and you don't have to come out with some huge change and manage it all yourself. You also don't have to be in the business of like climbing poles and fixing your own fiber or any of that. That all gets taken care of in the lease agreement that you would do. For the asset. So, but it's a good question, because right now if you were to put in a bid and say, I want to go, from Forest Park, I want it to go from 100 meg to 200 meg, you would ask RIDE. And Karen, who's at RIDE, would sit there, Karen Cooper, she sits there with a fixed sum of money. And she'll ask you to prove you need to 200, and then she'll deny you because she doesn't have any money. Because that fixed fund is set. She only has so much money. The state only has its, small RITE fund, and the feds only give the state X amount of money. And when, all these schools start asking for higher and higher speed circuits, she doesn't have the money, so she says no all the time. And we're on the other end of it, trying to lobby for more for each individual school who's saying, because we have the proof that they're actually going through their circuit, and they have to get off the current, hybrid coax circuit, and they need to move to fiber. But she doesn't have any money. And so schools are getting tapped out all over the state because of this problem. So we're going to have to think, and believe me, these discussions that I'm having with you here are also happening at the state level. I'm having them with RIDE. I brought the FCC from Washington to meet with RIDE, and our Chief Information Officer, Tom Gerton, the new Chief Innovation Officer, Richard Cullata, is all involved with this, so they understand what needs to be done. There is opportunities that even if you're up to 50% funded from the federal government, there's opportunities for the state to match. And if the state puts in another 10%, the federal government will put in another 10%. So there's ways to actually get that number way up, but I need the state to continue to work towards that end, and I think they will, because they know their funds running out of money. But it's a good question, this idea of, is it fiber, is it dark fiber, is it, and what is it? This is the idea of constructing a dark fiber environment that you own for 20, 25 years. And the concept of ownership is an interesting thing. You don't actually have to own it as an asset. You can actually get into what's called an IRU, which is a long-term lease. So it actually is owned by a third party, whether it be Ocean or Cox or somebody like that. And then you have this long-term set prepaid lease that gets prepaid by the fund and so forth. And then you have it, you own it. Our entire infrastructure is made up of IRUs, of long-term leases of dark fiber. So it is a complicated but highly compelling thing to take a look at. So,
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, thank you for coming and presenting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is for you or for Mike, or have we done an analysis of what our peak bandwidth has been, and what's our assessment of when our peak bandwidth is? Is it during the park test? Is it during others?
So we just did an analysis. This week we were looking at the high school in particular, and we were getting some readings where our upload and download speeds were way down during the daytime. So we did modify the guest network, which I suspect a lot of the students' iPhones are all on. So we did turn the bandwidth down on that and turn the bandwidth up on our other SSIDs. And just over the past couple of days, we're getting much better performance. But globally, no, we have not done that.
We have all the tools. We can go to the Forest Parks and Stony Lanes. We can look at an individual school basis. We can do that analysis. We have trending analysis and tools that look at every school. We know when you're hitting that, and every year when we come back at the end of the year, we do an analysis, and we would show Mike and say, hey, this is where you're at, and you're running out, and you're bumping up against it, because there's two limiting factors. There's what you're buying for bulk internet capability for the district, and then there's what are you buying for a circuit into that school. Those are two different things, and they're actually bought separately. But we have all the tools to see where you're at.
So maybe this is more of a vision question, but I mean, as a concept, like, do we have a data hub now? Like, is the high school our data hub, or where the schools are all going to be connected to a data hub, or each school is going to be individual? I'm trying to envision like where we're headed to put it in concert, because example, if you're eventually talking with the town, right, if that's maybe potentially where this is headed, to have a town-wide kind of network, are we going to run multiple hubs? Are we going to run, I'm just trying to get a vision of where, like, this technology should head us in terms of how our infrastructure should look like.
I can certainly get you more information. I can email you how our current infrastructure is.
So, and that's red meat for me. So, the concept of shared infrastructure is a huge topic everywhere in the state, right? Our membership, by definition, is a fundamentally shared infrastructure. And once you get into the network and you have control over your asset, you can make the decision that you're talking about as you go along. Also, you can make that decision on an application-by-application basis. You may turn around, for example, and say, I want one town hub, right? In that town hub, I might have the school hub and the town hub, but it's still one physical facility. It has partitioned control. They're separated but shared. I may then turn around and say, I'm going to back up and we have a cloud service to back everything up in northern Massachusetts. The town could decide, the school could decide independently of the town. You could make those decisions as to the right architecture as you go along. One thing is very clear, is that the concept of moving towards shared infrastructure, and this is, Phil's heard my soapbox of 39 cities and towns, we don't need 78 data centers, right? We just don't, right? It's not the right way to architect it. It's the better way to understand is how you maintain your control, which is all doable from a technology perspective, but take advantage of a shared infrastructure like the fiber piece, like a consolidated data hub environment, and that kind of thing, and do that. But you need the platform. You can't do it unless you have the platform. But we should be moving, not just North Kingstown, but the entire state should be moving to a much more consolidated hub. The state itself is moving in that direction. The state has a whole bunch of separate networks that are now all running over Ocean. And once they got the platform to run over it, they were able to take things like the data center at CCRI and move it to the state data center. They could see it. It was right down the hill, right, in Warwick. They closed it, and they save all that power and all that infrastructure and the management. All that gets moved into a consolidated data center. So CCRI and a number of the state entities are starting to migrate and do that with the state data center in Warwick. And there's lots of options for this. It allows you to use things like cloud services when, if you were constrained, in the past on bandwidth, a cloud service doesn't exist because it doesn't perform. Now that compute power can be outside of your physical environment because the network is so fast. So you're right on target with thinking longer term about how the architecture can then evolve, and servers and all that kind of stuff, and where you put them, and what's the most cost-effective way for the town to take a look at that.
No, I just want to point out that, and I know that Dr. Ajay has reached out to the town, that this is really one of those circumstances where it's something that we need to, get them involved and look at together, because it's a prime example of trying to avoid duplicating things and work together on a project that really benefits both sides of the equation.
So, and not to tout Ocean's capability here, right? But we're like Switzerland, right? So we just built, for example, the first consolidated research environment for Care New England and Lifespan together. Shared infrastructure. They spent 2 years with lawyers to make sure that they would agree that they could work together at research. They compete for beds and things like that, but researchers, they want to work with each other. Once they did that, they came to Ocean and said, can you build this research infrastructure for us? Because neither one of us wants to own it ourselves on behalf of the other. And that's perfect for, an Ocean environment like we've done. So we built their joint research environment for them, and they both use it, and now Brown University is coming in, and they're going to use it as well. And that's what a shared infrastructure can ultimately turn into. They'll have their own control over their environments, but it's a shared infrastructure, and it doesn't cost anywhere near what it would have cost if they did it individually.
Thank you.
It's, you know, it's just clear to me, you know, when you talk about being prepared for the 21st century and the infrastructure involved, I don't think a lot of people think of the IT and the bandwidth. It's all things that you know it's there, but you don't really think much about it. And, you know, we've talked about this before with our 5-year plan for technology and moving forward from there. You know, I feel it would be a mistake not to follow up here, to ask Ocean to do some more work with us to see, you know, what this would involve and what kind of commitment we would be needing to make to take the next step here. And, you know, I think we could go from there. And I've already encouraged the town. I was hoping to have representatives from the town council here this evening. Obviously, they were not able to make it. But I will send something to them as well, again, and encourage them to speak with Mr. Marble as well in this initiative and join us in this effort. But I do like the idea about, you know, it can be a benefit to both of us. People talk about consolidation of IT infrastructure. This is a great model where neither of us is kind of stepping on each other's toes, but we're both benefiting from a really solid infrastructure, which obviously town and schools are going to need moving forward.
And it turns out, you know, whether you know it or not, you already are, because we connected the town municipality within 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. And so we're now running the town's police, the town IT over the Ocean network. We've made the lateral to the building. We built all of that in. So you're already, I don't want to say halfway there, but you're already part of the way there, and you're already sharing an infrastructure. This is just completes the puzzle to the other buildings and the other things in the town, and then you own it long term, which is right now you're sort of paying for it as you go along. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones, did you want to have a recognition for the high school play?
Yeah, I did. I just want to make a note that the superintendent encouraged us. I went to the high school musical, and it was an absolutely top-notch performance, and it was just well done, and great to see all the community out there and all the hard work the students and our music department and others, volunteers who came out, and the orchestra and the crew and everyone. It was just well done.
That was one of the points, you know, a big congratulations to Norma Kayaza, who oversees that whole operation. It is amazing the work that she does, involving so many adults and about 120 high school students who get involved in this, between the music and the performance and the set and everything that gets involved. It's quite an operation. So congratulations, another great reflection of, you know, our community, and just the fact that they have 4 shows, and I don't know if they're sold out, but they come pretty darn close, and that's a lot of people from the community coming to North Kingstown High School for something so positive. Also, a couple of things, and I think Dr. Humbert has one as well. The DECA Career Development Conference state competition was this weekend. 14 of the 24 members from NK, just to have 24 members compete in this is great. 14 of our members placed in the top 3 of various business events, receiving medals and in some cases money toward college at Johnson & Wales, scholarships ranging from $750 to $1,000. So congratulations to Mr. Garland and business teachers who oversee this, and to all the students who've been involved. And Stephen Landry, you've probably heard that name before. He was the 2013 and 14 state championship in the spelling bee. Well, this year he came in 2nd place. But and that will end his career in spelling. in the state competition, and over that time, he has accrued 4 district championships, 1 district runner-up, 2 state championships, and 1 state runner-up. So way to go, Stephen. Thank you for making us so proud and representing the district so well.
Okay. Dr. Humphrey, did you?
We had the symbol.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have one individual who signed up for citizens' comments, Jenny Hoskins.
Jenny Hoskins, 26 Sylvan Court. I know you guys are voting on the new school calendar, looking at that for next year. I just want to make a comment about the school calendar from last year, and I don't know, Dr. Ajay, if with the superintendent's meetings, if they can ever come to an agreement on, you know, they cut down to 4 days for the February vacation, which I completely understand, except that it was 4 different days for my husband who teaches in Providence and my kids who live in North Kingstown. So we still didn't get to do anything as a family. I just feel like if you're going to cut it down to 4 days, could the schools get together and look at the calendars in any way so that they have the same 4 days off? That being said, I'm hoping that in the future and going forward that we can really start looking at a March vacation around the testing and everything that has to be done. But March is a 5-week month. It's always a really long month. I really feel like if you ski or if you do other winter activities, you could still do them in March. You can't do them in April. And we also lose out on our timeshare in Colorado because we can't use it anymore. So I just really think that we need to look. I understand losing the February vacation. I'm not upset about that, but I just really think that maybe we could do a March vacation and not something at the end of April. Just thoughts.
Can we move it on the agenda?
Calendar up.
You talk about it on the, you have calendar on the.
Yeah.
We can move the
That's what I'm
calendar
asking.
up.
Yeah. Motion to move the calendar up on the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Calendar's been moved up.
Okay, so that way I can address your concerns. This proposal for the calendar sticks to some of the basics that we've had last year. We had we did a survey last year, a lot of responses from parents and staff, and 75% of those responding wanted school to begin after Labor Day. That was a little difficult on us this year in particular because Labor Day was on the late side this year. But we made that work. We're continuing with that as the proposal for the next year going forward. We're also continuing, my proposal includes the February vacation, or non-vacation in this case. It will be a long weekend with a professional day on the Friday and the Monday being the President's Day holiday. So the students would have a 4-day weekend in there. For the reasons that Mrs. Hoskins pointed out, I didn't feel comfortable quite yet moving to, or proposing at least, a March vacation. While many people that I talk to see that as a really good option, right now I'm only aware of 1, maybe 2 districts in the whole state that are actually going there. And I would feel more comfortable the more that do it. On the February item, I think we're probably at about 12 or 13 districts around the state that take that do not take the February break. So it's hard to say whether we've kind of plateaued at that as a state or whether there are going to be more to do that in the upcoming years. But right now, what I'm aware of is about 12 or 13 districts do the February vacation or non-vacation the way that we are doing it. But just about everybody is still sticking to that April week. And I think partially because, we've had teachers in the district as well who, they have vacation time at a certain point, but the kids have a different time if they're in, say, Warwick, who still has that February week. So I wouldn't want to do that to them twice, at least without surveying the community. So I would want next year for us to survey the community and see if that's where we would like to go for, the following year after that. But for right now, I just don't feel comfortable going to this point. We've also adjusted the high school graduation time We were on a Wednesday night. I think it was the first Wednesday, Dr. Mansur? Yeah. And we moved that a few days later on the weekend now, on Sunday afternoon. And that will make sure that our seniors have a comfortable zone where they can complete all of their days and have time for things like graduation practice and class trip and that sort of thing without, and still get in the 171 days they need to get in by law. We were coming very close to that where, 2 or 3 snow days could make it so that we would have to rebook the graduation. I cannot tell you how difficult that could be, particularly when you're booked at the Ryan Center and you don't have much say over, available times. So we did that work in advance, and so that would be pushed back. I don't know if anyone has questions. Yes.
So I can relate to Mrs. Hoskins because this past February vacation was my first experience with it, and my son, who's in a different school district, had the whole school vacation off, but not the Friday before, where my daughter, who's in NK, had the Friday before and only the Monday. So we didn't get to take advantage of our whole ski weekend or ski week as well. But I think she raises a valid point that maybe it's worthwhile looking into what other districts are doing. Instead of doing a Friday and a Monday, is it possible that you could have a professional development day on Monday and then the Tuesday? So at least families could have a long weekend. It's tough when you got one in school on a Friday and then one on a Monday, whereas if they had 2 consecutive days, it might be a little more helpful for families.
Originally, we had the Monday and the Tuesday. A teacher, Mr. Abedisian, came to the committee and asked for it to be Friday-Monday combination so that we would have 2 weeks in a row with 4 days of school. And the school committee supported that.
Actually, didn't you originally propose Monday and Friday of the same week so there were 2 3-day weekends in a row? And the concern was that the classes at the high school with the block scheduling, you'd lose a Monday and a Friday of the same class, and you would have the Tuesday, Thursday classes?
With the Monday, the Tuesday combination, you had 3 days in that second week. And so in that particular week, some classes would only meet once at the high school. That was the concern. With putting one of the days off on the Friday and one on the Monday, you have 2 weeks in a row that have 4 days of school. So on the block schedule at the high school, each class meets twice both weeks. That was the thinking.
I have had, this whole issue does prompt a little bit of discussion in town, and I've had a couple of parents talk to me about it, and the suggestion about possibly going to March, because February, it seems like you just got back from Christmas, and now you're off again. And if you don't ski, you hang around a house because it's cold. In April, when they get back, it's almost the end of the year, so it's like, why are we taking a break now? March might make more sense. However, March is when the colleges have their spring break, and so as far as destinations where families might go, college kids have taken over most of those places, and it's really not a family environment, so that's something to think about too, changing it to March. April works for that reason.
Well, I think also a lot of the private schools have March in lieu of February and April. So it might be something to look at going forward. Maybe next year, as you said, do another survey and explore it further.
I just want everyone to know this is not a personal thing for me in any way. My vacation plans, I'll figure it out. But I do understand, for every decision, there's a give and a get, So, none of them are all that easy, and for some families, one idea works perfectly, and another, it creates an issue. So that's why we did poll the community, and we get some pretty strong numbers about that February item and about the Labor Day piece. And so that's where we've gone to. I'm pleased to report that we have not had significant, absenteeism from students or staff during that February week. Nothing that was too far out of the ordinary. So.
Also, this year's calendar is further complicated by a presidential primary and presidential election.
Yeah. Yes. So, so you're voting on the proposal? Yeah.
Can I have a motion to approve the calendar for the 2016-17 school year? All those in favor, do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Are there any exemptions to the consent agenda?
Can you back up? I think, under routine items, executive session.
Oh, sorry about that. Can I have a motion to seal the executive session minutes of March 8th, 2016?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I can disclose that there were no votes taken at the executive session of March 8, 2016. Now, is there anything to exempt from the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve the school committee approval of the memorandum of understanding for the park?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve the school committee approval of the memorandum of agreement?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Is there any comment on the assessment policy, ILBB, that's listed as a first reading? Okay, we've approved the school calendar.
Well,
Bob wants to go.
I think, because Dr. Humbert gave me a good explanation, so it might benefit the committee to elaborate on what she provided in terms of understanding what the comprehensive assessment system is.
So the state came out with the document that you have received already, which is the comprehensive assessment system, and that basically explains. It's a complete overview of the type of assessments that we do, including summative assessments, formative assessments, interim assessments, how things are scored, what the validity is, what the reliability is. All of that information is in there. It's a 62-page document for those of you who are here who have not seen it. It is available on the RIDE website. In addition to that, that's just an informative way of looking at assessments and how they are used and how frequently they are used. However, we also, as a district, were one of 4 districts that participated in a year-long study on the use of our assessments. And so we had representatives, this was in 2014-15, we had representatives at our 3 levels. So Dr. Manzeri, who's here, represented the high school level. Mrs. Logan represented the middle school level, and Mrs. Seitler represented the elementary level. And we met with RIDE and went through all of our assessments. We built a matrix. This was the second time we had actually done it. We had done it when I first arrived in the district and went through a complete analysis of all the assessments that we were doing. And then this was just to be able to go through and really analyze the purpose of the assessments, the frequency of them, Did we have any redundancy? Were they all necessary? You know, just in light of the amount of testing time, everybody's concerned about testing time taking more time from instruction, and so that was the point of doing this. So we met through the entire year and went through and really evaluated, made some adjustments to our system. So we've really spent some time looking at our assessment system, and when we say it's comprehensive, it involves everything. It looks at the unit testing that we do. It looks at our common assessments that we have at the secondary level and even at the elementary level. It looks at what types of things we're doing for formative assessment, how we're using data, et cetera. So we're pretty on top of the whole issue, and I think that's about it.
Thank you. Any further questions? So the last item on our new business discussion is an item that Mr. Jones requested be put on the agenda. Proposed correspondence to the North Kingstown Town Council requesting a Charter Commission review of the budget process. Mr. Jones, would you like to elaborate?
Yes, thank you. So I think as I mentioned at our previous sessions in February, when we sort of go back and forth on the budget and how nice it would be, obviously everyone wants more time, but that some of the data we need to make some more informed budgeting generally comes in March. And while I understand the town is going to have their initial sit-downs, I guess, here next week or pretty soon. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock. Sooner than later. I still think that, you know, the school being 2/3 or approximately that of the town budget, that it might be better to consider trading off a little more time with the budget residing still in the school hands as opposed to moving to the town and doing a review and then making the same points that we're going to have to come back again in April and et cetera, to update our charter school enrollments or General Assembly changes or our census counts or some of those other things. And so I think it may be worthwhile. It was an issue that the Charter Commission failed to consider last time in 2014, I think, when they met. And so I would propose that the committee consider sending correspondence to the town asking if they'd be willing to commission the Charter Commission to take up the issue of reviewing the budget timeline, specifically as it deals with the school, but perhaps the whole budget time frames for the sake of, one, clarity, and two, whether adjusting some of the timelines may create a better product in the end.
I looked into this a little bit, and my understanding is that one of the things that drives the schedule is the need to have time at the end in case there was an all-day referendum, and it takes time to do that, and then you still have to have your entire budget approved before the fiscal year. So it kind of starts with that and backs up. There may be a way that they could at least extend the school because, you know, they have to spend a lot more time on the line items of each town department where they're not doing that with the school. But that's my understanding is what really drives that schedule.
My concern would be that we get squeezed on the back end again because right now I feel like there's limited time at the end. So for this year in this particular cycle, we'll get our number on May 2nd. So that means that we only have 2 school committee meetings, and really the first one in the month would be really tight. We need to get reduction in force information to you based on the number, and it just seems like that's a very quick time frame as well. If there are extensive cuts that need to be made or any cuts that need to be made, I would be concerned that if we push it further, that we give it to the town they're going to push it out further for us to get our number. My question would be why from this year's calendar, Monday, March 28th is going to be the vote on the preliminary budget approved by the town council, and that will be a recommendation for the school department as well. Why it takes until May 2nd for us to get our number.
Sorry, what is the date for the public hearing?
The public hearing, our hearing with them is April 11th.
After they adopt the budget.
A couple of weeks after.
They vote on a preliminary number, then they invite us to have a full citizens kind of hearing. Yeah.
And then you're talking about the referendum, which is June 1st is the deadline to, if there's going to be a referendum held, is June 1st.
After the public hearings, do they meet again to adopt a final budget number?
That's what they do in the first week of May.
Yes, so what they'll do on, May 2nd. Town council meeting to consider petitions and discussion of preliminary budget. Deadline for final approval of town council's adopted budget is Wednesday the 4th. So it's from really March 28th all the way this year till Wednesday, May 4th, where we'll even get our number. And if that gets pushed out another week or two, there's going to be even much more pressure and racing to make cuts or adjustments. A reduction in force has to be by June 1st for the teachers union. It just seems like if we squeeze it, it needs to be in the middle instead of extending out further.
Well, yeah, I would concur, which is why I think the charter, I mean, if you look at the language, right, the council shall have 2 weeks and must do so before the 36th day prior to the first Wednesday in May. I mean, could we at least just say May 15th, April 5th, right? I mean, you know, it was
First Monday in May or whatever.
In 24 years ago. So, you know, I won't say times were different then, but I think the times were slightly different then in terms of some of the process stuff.
And the use copy machines that.
And I mean, it does say in here that, you know, the town manager has to, or the town clerk has to have time for arrange publication, to arrange circulation, to make sufficient copies of the budget. I mean, this was clearly also thought of in a time when those things were more prevalent. And so, again, whether it's, as Mr. King said, I just think maybe it would be wise to have the Charter Commission just look at it in consultation with the town and the school and kind of go, you know, if nothing else, let's clean the language up a little, and then let's take the wisdom we've learned over 24 years in terms of how the process works and say, can we do better? And, you know, and maybe we should look at, you know, not that I don't think citizens shouldn't have a way of petitioning for a change, but maybe there's a different way to petition for a change. You know, maybe there's floor motion that the town meeting, right? There's other kinds of options they could consider that might not be as costly or as time consuming. So I just think, you know, just ask the town council to take a look at it, and maybe they'll think everything's hunky-dory, or maybe they can get a few of our wise citizens together to give them another opinion.
My only suggestion would be, I'd ask Mary if she could put together some kind of guidance for this group so that they'll know what the limitations are that the school department faces. You don't want them to be, you know, going on.
Carte blanche without.
Right. And coming back with something that doesn't work. So, you know, the constraints that we have. Okay. So do we need a motion? No. No, jump into business.
No, just to talk about it.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody.